Well, after our wedding, my wife demanded a recount. Actually, to be fair, I asked for one too. Let me explain this. When we got married, I was a child, a mere 20 years old, and I thought I knew everything, or at least enough. Besides, I was a fundamentalist Christian at the time, and if you're a fundamentalist Christian, you're pretty sure you know everything. A little marriage taught me that I didn't know much at all. Life has a way of teaching you that you need to know more. Now, we wrote our own wedding vows, and we took ideas from various parts of the Bible. The Apostle Paul wrote about the husband being the head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church. And whoever put together the book of Proverbs had the same kind of idea about marriage as well. That section that Eric read from Proverbs 31 is very sweet, but it does imply that a woman's place is slightly subservient and in the home, managing the household. So our wedding vows had words of love and commitment, of course, but the wedding vows we wrote also had me taking the role of spiritual head in our marriage. My wife's vows involved the idea of submission to that authority. Well, later, we demanded a recount. This took place within 3 years of our wedding. The fun had started to go out of fundamentalism for us. We had started to question some of the teachings of fundamentalist Christianity, and that includes the teaching about hierarchy in marriage. And I remember talking to my wife about our wedding vows, and I said, "You don't believe that stuff anymore about me being the head of our marriage, do you?" And she said no. So we decided to revise our vows. We kept the love and the commitment, but we added the idea of equal partnership. We demanded a recount, and we got it. Up until then, we had simply taken in some traditional teachings without question. We were both good little church kids, and we just figured that if it was in the Bible, it must be right. And then we grew up, and we kept growing up together after our wedding. We decided that the idea of me being in charge was silly. Besides, I never really was in charge for a moment anyway. Now, oddly enough, I can blame all this on Jesus. Jesus is subversive. He even subverts the Bible. Jesus is all about making the circle bigger. Take that story we heard Dorothy read from Mark's Gospel. Jesus holds children up as a model for his disciples. Not us. That's just so sweet. We love having kids in church today. We just think kids are wonderful. Well, that's not quite how things were in the first century. Children were in a different class back then. They were only potential human beings, not real full human beings. Their status was that of non-persons. They were nobodies, at least until they grew up. Well, Jesus had a way of turning nobodies into somebodies. Look at how he interacted with children and with women and with lepers and outcasts, with all the non-people of his time. The more I watch him deal with people in the Gospels, the more I see that it's all about making the circle bigger. Jesus is not interested in patriarchal authority. Jesus is interested in making the circle bigger. So, my wife and I demanded a recount, and we redid our wedding vows to reflect who we really are and how we really live and love each other. Now, we ended up joining the Episcopal Church sometime later. In that Proverbs text we heard today, a woman's place is in the home. We soon found out that in the Episcopal Church, a woman's place is also at the altar, and in the house of bishops, and in the office of the presiding bishop. The circle has gotten bigger. I think that's because we are interested in the Jesus pattern. He treated women and children and outcasts and even enemies with respect. He drew the circle bigger. And that history is part of our history. Just consider a few of these dates. In 1848, women gathered in Seneca Falls, New York, to move women's rights in our nation forward. In 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution gave women the right to vote. However, women were not allowed to serve on parish vestries in the Episcopal Church until the 1960s. In 1989, Barbara Harris became the first female bishop of the Episcopal Church. In 2006, Catherine Jeffords Shorey became our presiding bishop. The circle is getting bigger, and I'm glad. In 2010, my twin granddaughters were born. In 2012, Natalie Jean Hall was born. I want them to grow up in a world where the circle is bigger still. I want them to grow up in a world where what divides us, gender, age, ability versus disability, religion, nationality, is overshadowed by what unites us, our common humanity. I want my granddaughters to grow up in a world where everyone is treated as they should be treated. I want them to grow up in a world of compassion and cooperation and companionship. As the baptismal covenant just asked us, will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? Is the church drawing the circle bigger? Is the United States drawing the circle bigger? Is our world drawing the circle bigger? Until we can all answer a big yes to that question, do what my wife and I did. Demand a recount. Amen. Amen. And we continue with the prayers of the people.